The desert wind carried a strange silence that morning, a silence too still, too perfect. The kind that comes before something big changes. Luke Carver guided his horse along the ridge, the sun climbing behind him like a torch, lighting his path. He'd ridden 3 days through dust and heat, past canyons and ghost towns, to get here, to an abandoned mission, rumored to hold what no man dared to claim. They said she'd been left there by her tribe, a bride without a husband, cursed by silence, untouched by love. The Apache bride, they called her. Every man who'd tried to approach her had ridden away with fear in his heart, as though she carried something unholy behind her veil. Luke didn't believe in curses. He believed in scars, the kind life left behind after taking too much from a man, and he had plenty of his own. When he reached the mission, the place looked half-eaten by the sun. The old stone walls glowed pale and cracked, and the wooden door hung by one hinge. The silence pressed against him. Even the wind had stopped. He dismounted slowly, boots hitting the dry earth. His voice carried softly through the open air. "Anyone here?" No answer, until a shadow moved just beyond the doorway. He reached for his hat brim out of habit, lowering it. "I ain't here to harm you." The figure stepped out. She was tall, her posture proud but weary. A long veil of woven cloth covered her face, trailing down past her chest. Her dress, once white, was faded and dust-stained. But it wasn't her clothes that caught him. It was her stillness, like the desert itself had shaped her. "You're the one they call the Apache bride," he said quietly. She didn't answer, only a faint nod. He sighed. "Name's Luke Carver, rancher, got land south of Red Mesa. Heard you might be needing a place to stay." Nothing. Just the faint lift of her chin, the wind brushing her veil slightly. Luke shifted, uncomfortable under her silence. "Can't promise much. Just land, work, and peace. 3 things most folks forget to be grateful for." Still she said nothing. Then softly she raised her hand, a single finger, and pointed to his horse. "You want to ride?" He guessed. She nodded. He frowned. "You trust me enough for that?" Her veil fluttered, and for a second he thought he saw the curve of a smile beneath it. He helped her mount, steady and respectful. She sat tall in the saddle, her hands gentle on the reins. He swung up behind her, careful not to touch her more than needed. And together, under the burning sun, they rode away from the mission, the place that had kept her prisoner in silence. The ride was long, and the air shimmered with heat. Luke tried to make conversation, but her silence stayed between them like glass. Only once did she speak, voice soft as wind through grass. "Why did you come?" He looked over, surprised. "Heard tell you needed help. That's all?" He nodded. "Ain't that enough?" She looked ahead again. "Men don't come for kindness. They come for what they can take." He didn't answer that. He couldn't. When the ranch came into view, the land spread wide like a golden sea. The fences stretched far, and a few cattle grazed near the creek. It was lonely but alive, just like him. He dismounted, then offered her a hand down. She hesitated before taking it. Her hand was small, cool, trembling just slightly, not with fear but something like memory. "You'll have your own space," he said, leading her toward the small cabin near the barn. "Ain't much, but it's quiet." She paused at the door. "Quiet is fine." Luke smiled faintly. "Then you'll fit right in." Days passed. She barely spoke. He didn't press. He saw her tending to the horses, moving with care and skill, like she understood them in ways most men never could. She never took off her veil, even under the sun. Sometimes at sunset he'd see her stand near the fence, the dying light painting her figure in gold, the veil glowing faintly like smoke. The townfolk whispered. Some said she was a spirit, others said she'd been burned and hid her scars. Luke ignored them all. He didn't care what she was hiding. She worked hard, never complained, and somehow her presence softened the silence that had lived in his house for years. But one night, as he fixed a broken fence under the lantern light, she came to him, the first time she'd sought him out. "The men in town," she said quietly, "they speak of me." He nodded. "Let 'em talk. Folks round here need something to whisper about, or they'll choke on their own boredom." Her voice trembled. "You're not afraid?" He smiled, hammering another nail. "Afraid of what?" Of what I am. He looked up, meeting her covered face. Ma'am, I fought war, buried family, and spent 5 winters alone in this desert. I ain't afraid of a woman. For a second, the air changed. A sound, half laugh, half sob, slipped through the veil. She turned to leave, but he stopped her gently. You don't have to hide from me. Her voice shook. You wouldn't say that if you knew. Maybe, maybe not. But I ain't the kind to judge a person by what's covered. She looked at him for a long time, then walked away. That night, Luke couldn't sleep. The moonlight touched her window across the yard, pale and still. Something inside him stirred, not desire, not pity, something older, a wanting to understand, to know the truth of her silence. By the next morning, things had changed. She moved differently, lighter, freer, almost like she'd decided something in the night. At breakfast, she set a plate in front of him and said quietly, "Thank you." He looked up, surprised. For what? For not asking what lies beneath. He smiled faintly. If you ever want to tell me, I'll listen. If not, I'll still be here come sunrise. She met his eyes through the veil. You shouldn't say things like that. Why not? Because you'll mean them, he chuckled. I reckon I already do. The sunlight streamed through the window, warm and golden. For the first time, she didn't turn away from it. That evening, a storm rolled across the plains, sudden, fierce and wild. Luke ran out to pull the cattle into shelter, rain slicing through the air. When he came back, soaked to the bone, she was waiting on the porch. Inside, she urged. I'm fine. You'll catch fever. He laughed. It can't be worse than the one you've given me. She blinked under her veil, confused. What do you mean? He hesitated and then softly, I ain't thought of anyone like this in years. The storm cracked overhead. Thunder rolled, shaking the porch. She stepped closer, the rain soaking her dress. You don't even know me, she whispered. He met her gaze. Then let me. Her hands trembled at her sides. Then slowly she reached for the veil. Don't, he said gently. You don't owe me that. Her voice was barely a breath. I need you to see. The fabric fell away, slow as dawn. The rain hissed against the ground. And in that moment, Luke forgot to breathe. She wasn't cursed. She wasn't scarred. She was beautiful, achingly, painfully beautiful, but her face carried a mark of something deeper. One side bore faint traces of burns, healed long ago. But her eyes were alive, fierce, full of light. This is what men couldn't love, she said, trembling. This is what made me a ghost. Luke stepped forward, the rain dripping from his hat brim. He lifted his hand, hesitated, then touched her cheek gently. They were fools, he whispered. Her breath caught. You don't pity me? He smiled softly. You think I see damage, but all I see is proof you survived. For the first time she smiled, real and raw. The storm softened, the rain turning to a drizzle, and sunlight broke through the clouds behind them. The next morning broke bright and warm, sunlight spilling across the ranch like a promise. The storm had left everything shining, the soil dark, the air sweet, and the creek full again. Luke stepped outside, the boards creaking under his boots, and saw her by the fence, brushing down one of the horses. The veil was gone. Her hair fell loose around her shoulders, dark and glinting in the sun. For a moment he just watched her. The way the light touched her face, the same face that others had turned from, made his chest ache with something he hadn't felt in years. She turned, catching him looking. You should stop staring, she said softly, though a smile tugged at her lips. He tipped his hat. Hard to, with the sun hitting like that. She rolled her eyes, but he saw the color rise in her cheeks. You talk like every cowboy with a secret wish. Maybe I just learned to say what I mean. She didn't answer, but her smile lingered as she went back to work. As days passed, something changed in the air around them. The ranch, once silent as a grave, felt alive again, filled with the rhythm of work, laughter, and the kind of quiet that meant peace. Not loneliness. Her name, he learned, was Naya. It meant renewal in her tongue. Fitting, he thought. Because since she came, it felt like the land itself had begun to breathe again. Naya proved strong, not fragile like people had whispered. She fixed fences, carried water, and tamed a horse that no man in town had dared ride. When she moved, she did it with a grace that came from surviving the desert, from knowing how to read wind and sand and silence. One afternoon, as they worked near the corral, Luke said quietly, "You ride better than most men I've known." She smiled faintly. "I had to." "The desert doesn't forgive weakness," he nodded. "Neither does this world." Naya glanced at him. "You've known loss too." He said nothing for a while. "Then my wife and son, fever took 'em years back." She lowered her gaze. "I'm sorry," he shrugged. "Ain't your sorrow to carry." "But I understand it," she said softly. "Grief has a language all its own." For a long time, neither spoke. Only the wind moved, warm and dry, carrying the scent of sage and horses. Then Naya looked at him again. "Maybe that's why we met. Two souls the world forgot." Luke's chest tightened. He looked at her, really looked, and realized how right she was. But peace, like all things in the wild, never lasted. That evening, a rider came from town, a man named Briggs, one of Sheriff Colt's hands. He rode up fast, dust cloud trailing behind, and stopped at Luke's gate. "Carver," he called, sneering. "You keeping company with that Apache girl?" Luke stepped onto the porch, his voice calm. "She's working for me. That's all you need to know." Briggs laughed harshly. "Working? Folks in town say she was bought. Say she was some kind of tribal bride gone wrong. That true?" Luke's jaw tightened. "You tell folks in town they can keep their lies. Ain't none of their business what goes on out here." Briggs leaned forward, eyes mean. "She's bad luck, Carver. Her kind brings death. You best send her away before trouble finds you." Luke's gaze stayed cold. "You done talking?" Briggs spat in the dirt. "Just don't say we didn't warn you." Then he turned and rode off, laughter fading in the distance. Naya had come to the porch during the exchange, her eyes dark. "They'll come again," she said quietly. "Let 'em," Luke replied. "Ain't the first time I've had to stand my ground." She shook her head. "You don't understand. The man they call Sheriff, he's not after justice. He's after control. I ran from him once. He doesn't like being denied." Luke's eyes narrowed. "Colt, you ran from him?" Naya hesitated, then nodded. "He wanted to marry me after a raid, to show the town he could tame the wild blood. But when I refused, he killed my brother. I escaped. I thought the desert had hidden me for good." Luke's hands curled into fists. "He's a coward hiding behind a badge." "Coward or not," she said softly, "he'll come. And when he does, he won't fight fair." Luke looked at her, the sun low behind her shoulders, turning her into a shape of gold and fire. "Then he'll find out I don't fight fair either." The next morning, the sky burned blue and gold. Luke hitched his horse, checking the rifle strapped to his saddle. "You're going to him, aren't you?" Naya asked from the doorway. "Just to talk." "You don't talk with men like Colt, you survive them." He smiled faintly. "You got a funny way of caring." She stepped closer, her hand catching his sleeve. "Promise me you'll come back." He looked down at her hand, small, trembling yet strong. "I ain't got much reason to die now, Naya." Her voice broke slightly. "Because of me." He didn't answer. Instead, he leaned down and pressed his forehead gently to hers. "Because someone's got to make sure the world learns to see you right." She closed her eyes, breathing in the sunlight and dust. "Then come back before the sun sets." "I will." And then he rode off, the horse's hooves kicking up gold dust behind him. When Luke reached town, the people stared. Whispers followed him down the boardwalk. "Apache woman. Cursed rancher. He's lost his mind." He ignored them all and pushed open the saloon doors. Sheriff Colt was there, boots up on the table, cigar smoke curling in the air. His eyes, cold and mean, found Luke at once. "Well, look what the desert blew in," Colt drawled. "You heard you been keeping a wild one on your